Hi, my name's Andrew McLaren, and I want to help you teach evolution in an equitable way that lets everyone access this. And the biggest issue around evolution in the United States is that a lot of people feel that it comes into conflict with their religious beliefs. And I want to show you a series of slides that I've got, and this will all be on Teachers Pay Teachers, on how I directly address that, because I don't think being indirect or trying to like trick the students into seeing evolution or understanding evolution is very honest. And I've talked with teachers who themselves are pretty religious and they want to kind of hide this fact from the students. And it didn't feel very good to me as someone who is a biologist and views this as a central idea in biology. It was important to teach this authentically and honestly with the students. So I'm going to show you in this video how I did that. And I've also got like a parent letter that I sent out to parents and a couple of resources I'll show you. So I'd like to start with the parent letter because I sent this out to the community that I was teaching at that was fairly conservative. And because of how I front loaded teaching evolution, I didn't really have any issues with students. And a lot of religious families told me during parent teacher conferences that they really appreciated these and it helped them understand kind of my perspective on this. And it was really, really useful in terms of just maintaining good relations with throughout the community, where typically a lot of students might shut down when you start teaching evolution. I didn't really see that because we were able to be upfront and honest. So I like sharing the NSTA's statement on teaching evolution here because it's very thought out. It's got tons of references in the bottom, and it makes it pretty clear that we should not be teaching creationism in the science classroom. I'll let you read a little bit more as to why, because it's pretty difficult to word it just right without upsetting people. But it is important to emphasize that evolution is the consensus. That is what we're going to be teaching in the classroom because there's consensus there. And then there's also these science standards that are relevant. So I'm showing them, hey, this is something that I have to teach because these are the standards. That kind of takes some of the weight off of your shoulders as well. If you're in a state that doesn't use the NGSS, if they've got their own state standards, they may have written in creationism into these standards. So just be kind of careful there. That's largely one of the reasons why people did not adopt the NGSS is because they wanted to rewrite some of the language around climate change and evolution. Um, so just be careful there. But broadly speaking, this is a really useful way to help parents feel comfortable with what you're teaching and why you're teaching it in this context. So I made these slides because I was teaching in a conservative religious community, and they were not particularly open to the idea of evolution being taught there. Or, I mean, broadly speaking, the community was, but there's plenty of individuals who felt very strongly about it. And teachers told me they had many students who would just shut down during that part of the year, feel kind of attacked, and they would normally be great students, totally learning, but this just created an issue with them being able to learn these ideas. And for me, I just start directly with that with the students is that the reason that I'm teaching evolution here is because it's equitable for everyone to understand this and it gives you access to more careers. That's huge because I'm trying to help you by teaching this evolution. I'm not trying to attack. I'm not trying to change minds. I'm just trying to give you more opportunities and help you understand science better, which is good for you. So that's a nice place to start. Like there's good intention here, right? And then you can dive into this conversation about what is evolution, what have you heard about it, and just kind of get the ideas out there. And most students will be kind of interested to know that evolution, the word, it kind of originally meant something going in a linear direction or a certain direction. So revolution's like a circle, revolving, right? But evolving is kind of a linear thing. So that's the origin of the word, but it gives a false impression about what evolution really is because it's not a linear process. So that's kind of interesting for students to know that like this word has changed its meaning over time and it was kind of adopted by biologists to mean something similar. But there's some confusion in language and how it's used by scientists and everyday worlds as well. So we need to clarify that it can have different meanings, a word, in different contexts, right? And then I would have them discuss what the theory of evolution has given us so far. Like, how has this been useful for us? And even students who support the idea of this being taught in class would have a hard time telling you why this has been good for us. Um, but when you really think about this, this has saved countless lives, us understanding DNA. So anything involving genetics, anything involving like genetic conditions or genealogy, anything around catching criminals with DNA evidence, all of that has been made possible because we knew about DNA and we were looking for DNA because of this idea of inheritance, of genetics, of traits and genes and alleles and all that stuff. None of that would be possible if it wasn't for this idea of evolution. So when you really kind of help students understand that we wouldn't have a lot of modern day technology that makes our lives better without this theory, that helps them see the benefit as well as possible careers. And it helps them see that this isn't done giving to us. There's also other things that we're using, like de-extincting species, bringing them back, all kinds of interesting things that we can do with DNA. And that's because of these principles of inheritance and evolution and natural selection, which led to these other discoveries. You could say like eventually we might have gotten microscopes so good that we could have seen those things, but why would we be looking there in the first place if we hadn't had these theories? So then I like to talk about why this is kind of controversial, just having them discuss why they think it's controversial, and also discuss what they think the words know versus believe mean, and how are they similar, how are they different. And this is a really good piece right here because this gets into like beliefs are just different than things that we know. When we know something, that's something that you can directly perceive. Like you can know that the moon's going to have certain cycles because that's something that's predictable and observable. But then you can have certain beliefs about that, which could be considered to be true or honest, but it's not necessarily the same as something that we know. Not saying that belief is like weaker, but it's actually different. So you can really value beliefs here, and students will oftentimes will talk about why they feel kind of um, that like beliefs are very important here, and they're like, oh, beliefs are great, and I would agree with them that beliefs can be good, um, but it's a matter of kind of knowing where the limit is of a belief and the limit of what we know, because when we say like I believe something, that can help build community, that can help give comfort in hard times. It's kind of like this idea of having faith can give a lot of good things to people, but we also need to recognize when we know something and say like, hey, we need to update what we're thinking and see the limits between these two and acknowledge that something is known even if it conflicts with some belief system. So we need to be able to update things based off of what we know, and that's an important aspect of this conversation, being like, hey, I'm not telling you that you know something different. You may believe something that's different, but that's different. And so it's important just to clarify that there's something that's when I'm talking about knowing something, I'm not saying that your beliefs are wrong. Just to clarify that, right? And then I like to talk to the students about like what theory really means in science versus everyday life. I have a couple definitions here that I would share with the students. And it's actually a law is interestingly, it's harder to have like a theory than a law. And so there's this law where it's like, okay, you're going to see the same thing every single time, kind of like gravity, but we don't really understand like how gravity works. So when we talk about something being a law in science, it's actually a little bit weaker than a theory. I actually have a really nice thing. I haven't really fully fleshed this out, but this was a vocab tool that I was thinking of doing for students. I made one for seventh graders, and then I was like thinking about how I do this with eighth graders, which would be really the best place, I think, to have this conversation where they're really having an understanding of all these different parts of science. So you can kind of see the scientific theory is connected to more pieces. It needs reasoning, it needs some sort of idea or big picture concept behind it for you to call something a theory, like the theory of evolution or the theory of plate tectonics, right? Or the theory of climate change. Those all have ideas that explain what we're seeing. When we talk about laws, they don't necessarily explain what we're seeing. They just say this will happen every single time. We don't know why, but we can have predictable outcomes. So that's an important clarification between a law and a theory. And I think I had like some definitions I had been working on this as well, just to help people understand that. And then also scientific consensus is good to help people understand that when we have scientific consensus about a theory, that's how we build what we know. So if we're trying to have discussions, we're talking about oftentimes theories that are supported by ideas or laws that don't really have an explanation. We just know that they happen all the time. So it's good to contrast that a little bit. Um, and then I'd like to highlight other historical issues where we've had what we know kind of come into conflict with what we believe, like the round Earth or the heliocentric model. Like we had a lot of people who believed the Earth was flat. We had evidence that it was round, and it took a long time for us to accept that. And um, now that we know the Earth is round, we can use that. We have like GPS systems, and time is measured better, and like life is just better all around for us. Now that we can have a better, truer idea of what's really going on around us, we can work with that a little bit accurately and have like more control in our lives, right? Same thing with like the heliocentric model when, okay, people realized the earth was round, but what's going on with the sun? That took a while for us to accept that. And there was people who suffered quite a bit and had their lives ruined because people would not accept what we know to be different than what we believe. And then cognition is also kind of interesting because for a long time people thought that people were special and that no other animals could have cognition. And then as we've done more science, we've seen that animals really do have thoughts, and it's pretty interesting. There's even language that a lot of them will have. Tool making is somewhat common in some species. And so there's this idea that we believed that we were special in terms of being able to like think in our heads and not just be a response of uh, instincts. And so that's kind of interesting now knowing what we know now, because now we can work with animals better and understand them better, knowing that they have real, true thoughts and feelings. So it's kind of an interesting thing to highlight how this has been an ongoing issue throughout humanity's past, where we have what we know might kind of clarify stuff that we didn't know beforehand, and we need to then change our belief system to not necessarily change it, but see what it can say and what it can't say, and kind of come to terms with that. And then I would give them a general overview of the unit, kind of like here are the main ideas that we're going to be going over in the class. And there were some questions that I gave them to discuss just to kind of get their brains going around artificial selection, because that's how I started that unit. So I do want to talk about the elephant in the room. Many states have made it illegal to teach scientific theories, and that number's probably going to grow in the future. They're saying that you have to only teach scientific facts, but that is what we call a scientific theory. It's something that we know as much as you can know. Nothing is known 100% in science. We can't tell you that something is 100% true. That is something that you can only really do with believing something. Like if you truly believe something, that is 100% right in your head. But that's not what we're talking about here. These are two different ways of viewing the world. Um, and it feels to me like the scientific way of knowing is honestly under attack. I don't like that. But also, we have to be making sure that we are not being perceived as being sneaky or tricky or trying to like trick students into seeing this stuff, because that's part of the issue here as well. So please try and be direct, but do so safely. Depending on your state, you may not be able to have this direct conversation. But if you were teaching evolution, I think you should have this direct conversation beforehand. Um, many students and families I've seen have greatly appreciated that. So best of luck. Let me know how it goes, and I'm here to help, okay? Thank you for McLearning with me. Before you go, please check out the following services that I offer with my business. So if you click the link in my videos, this goes to my website. I might be changing it from Podia because I'm no longer doing the interactive videos for sale. I might put those up for free. But most of my other services are linked here. So you can see that I've got like a Teachers Pay Teachers and a Wyzant. The Teachers Pay Teachers has a lot of my assessments that I have for like the NGSS, as well as lessons that I made when I was actually a teacher in the classroom. So I've got quite a few things like CERs and other things on there. If you want to get one-on-one live support from me, either like with science or like working on like teaching support lessons and that kind of stuff, you can sign up through Wyzant. I have a link to there where you can contact me there, and we can schedule hourly appointments. And I've got a few other things on here like a Facebook page, and other social media. And if you're interested in getting professional development with me for like a team of teachers, a whole page with information on that. So yeah, feel free to check that out. Thank you.